Good evening and welcome to the Franchise Tag with your host, myself, Freddie Hall. And welcome Johnny Bisbee on with me this evening. Sorry, I'm a bit thrown off because my laptop has decided that it just does not want to work anymore. So I am on, I've thrown together a bit of a setup on an iPad. I'm sure it's what the rest of the guys do, but usually I've got my laptop and nicer camera and my proper mic, and I'm a little bit more upward rather than here. I'm sort of backward, as you can sort of see all my jerseys. You can see the jerseys a little bit better, to be fair, with this camera angle. But yeah, and we obviously had the Monday night show last night, the preview of the two Monday night football games, and the Seahawks Lions game we said was going to be hopefully a barnstormer, and it was a pretty good game. We were all wrong about the Dolphins beating the Titans, so shows just what we know about NFL. Maybe which means does not mean turn the channel now. Me and Johnny definitely know something about NFL. Don't worry, everything we're going to talk about is going to be very relevant. But yeah, quite an active weekend of NFL, Johnny. Obviously, we've got the London games coming up this weekend as well. Very exciting times where we are in.
Can't wait, mate. Yeah, the international series. Obviously, we had the game earlier on in the year in Brazil, but yeah, it feels like it really gets going when it comes to London. And hopefully we'll have, a really good game. Unfortunately, the Jets don't come into it in good form, but we know how explosive they can be when they get dialed in, and they're coming up, against possibly the best team in the NFL at the moment in the Minnesota Vikings. So yeah, two great teams, two great franchises with fantastic fan bases that we both know over here. So yeah, it should be a really good day on Sunday to kickstart the London series once again.
Very, very excited indeed. So we'll move on to tonight's show, and that is obviously going to be, as our tagline sort of says, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and then move into the Washington Commanders. We're going to talk in depth of the Eagles and then the Commanders. So we'll start with the Eagles tonight. Obviously, it's felt like a bit of a slow start for them, hasn't it, Johnny? I mean, there's a lot of question marks over this team at the minute. Currently 2-2, third in the NFC East. Obviously beat the Packers in Brazil 34-29. Then lost to the Falcons in that close game, 22-21. Then beat the Saints in that another close game, 15-12, and then lost to the Bucs over the weekend, 33-16. Have to admit that they were without AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Obviously, it's the second week that AJ Brown has been out. But the sort of murmurs of upset around Philadelphia and their fan base and around the NFL is starting to slowly creep in here, Johnny, because this team felt so dominant just a blink of an eye ago, and now it feels like this team is incredibly beatable and seems like the cracks are sort of showing. So what do you think is going wrong with the Philadelphia Eagles so far this season?
Yeah, I certainly think this is now becoming a bit of a long-term theme. Like you're right in saying that it wasn't too long ago when the Eagles were considered one of the best teams in the league. But I think certainly towards the end of last season, there were murmurings. You could see I suppose the disgruntled nature of the relationship between Nick Sirianni and his quarterback Jalen Hurts. That came to centre quite quickly. I think not just at the end of last season, but into the off season. And that has spilled over into this year. And I think before the Buccaneers game, you could, if you were looking at this team and its record from the outside, without taking too much context away, they obviously 2-1, probably a catch away from being 3-0. Not defeat to the Falcons was very close. So you could have been, I think, forgiven for thinking that the Eagles were a strong team, and really excited. I suppose the fan bases must have been really excited, but the Buccaneers completely dominated them from start to finish, really on Sunday, and that's been a trend, I think, for the last couple of seasons. The Buccaneers having the number over the Eagles, and I think this particular matchup is really significant because it shows that the Eagles haven't got an answer and haven't got a sufficient game plan, despite the injuries that you mentioned. This is one of the most talent-laden teams in the NFL, and they haven't been able to come up with an answer to to Todd Bowles and the Bucks over the last couple of seasons, and it was exemplified this weekend. The team, I think, is really lacking discipline across the board. The offensive line is looking, it's giving up pressures everywhere, and that's not something that you expect from the Eagles. And I think it all comes down to poor man management, poor game management, and we've said time and time again that I've mentioned that the relationship between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni has been something that has been cast into the limelight, and I don't know how this changes other than a change in leadership. The players don't seem to be willing to turn up for the coach. I feel it's a very heavy thing to say, but I think there are just so many red flags when you can clearly see. I think it's almost a lack of effort, I'd say. And is that because the team has quit on the head coach? We know how explosive these players are. This is a team that is very similar. They've obviously lost players who've been with the team over a number of years in the last couple of seasons since they got back to the Super Bowl just 2 seasons ago. But they have replaced them with like for like, really, really good players. And there is something obviously very quite clearly wrong with the Eagles, because their season isn't over if they're 2-2, but people are just writing them off already. And I think the window is closed on the team in terms of this setup. And I think that the if you were going to make a change, I think it would have to start with the head coach.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the eyes are on Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts as well. There was a lot of people knocking around saying that Jalen Hurts was a top 5 quarterback in this league, and it's just not looking that way this year. They didn't really utilize Saquon. It felt like initially in Brazil, and then suddenly they went to him and it exploded. But a lot of pressure is being put on Jalen Hurts. But when I look at it, 15th best offense at the minute, 14th in passing yards, joint 18th on passing touchdowns. They are 8th in interceptions, which is a massive problem, obviously. But they're 7th in rushing touchdowns and 4th in rushing yards. They clearly have a game plan of what they're meant to be doing. And if they stick to that game plan, I think they can succeed. But you flip it over, everyone's criticizing Jalen Hurts and the way this offense is going. You flip it over to the defense. It's the 23rd best defense. They're 27 in total offensive yards. They allowed 948 yards, which is, like I said, 27th worst. They're 10th in interceptions. They only have 2 on the season. They're allowing they've allowed 515 rushing yards, which is 21st. They've allowed 7 passing touchdowns as well. So, running wise, they're not too bad, but over the top, they seem to be terrible. And that's where the books were beating them over the weekend. So is it unfair for the criticism that Jalen Hurts is getting? Because it seems like his defense doesn't seem to be helping him out.
I think there's a combination of everything. I certainly think some of, I think the good thing about this weekend is we didn't see a Jalen Hurts turnover, but, he was getting no help from the defensive line. And like you say, the offense has been, the defense, in this game, obviously the Saints weren't really at it offensively last weekend, but they gave up points against the Falcons, they gave up points against the Packers. And that's not what you come to expect from the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the defense that you look around and it has, so many players. And
the whole of Georgia's winning defense,
the whole of Georgia football, exactly. Yeah. But I think I think I read something earlier today that I think they may be 2nd or 3rd in terms of the amount of yards that they're averaging a game. Now that can be a combination of the offense not clicking, so they're giving the ball back to their opposition. But I think it's something's really not right. And I'm coming back to the saying that it all comes back to the game plans and people showing up for the coaches. They've not been able to get anything together. There's no pass rush, faulty tackling. I think Vic Fangio at the moment hasn't been able to. We know how good of a coach he is defensively, but if you can't get anything out of the Philadelphia Eagles, then yeah, I'm not sure who can. So yeah, there are so many question marks on the team. I think Hurts, I think, has obviously got a lot of criticism, particularly for his his passing game and over the years. But I think this year some of the play calls from the Eagles haven't necessarily been his fault. Like you mentioned, obviously Saquon Barkley, the inability to get him into this game and at the start of the Packers game, and then obviously when they start to use him, we know what he can produce, but some of the fourth down plays have been pretty poor over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I think that they're the pieces that people remember, I think. And I'm certain that a lot of Eagles fans will be circling back to those misplays when they kind of make excuses, unfortunately, about why they're losing these games.
Well, it was Sirianni, isn't it? Sirianni is, he's getting a lot of critics for taking them risks, for doing too many risks, and I think it's been something amongst the Philadelphia Eagles fans for a hot minute now that he's not good enough to that they sort of saw that Super Bowl run that they had going to the Super Bowl as an outlier, really, and that actually it was the talent on the team that dragged them all the way there rather than the coaching. And I think patience is wearing thin for Nick Sirianni, Johnny, and really, and the Eagles are one of the most passionate fan bases in the whole of NFL, and the Eagles have been seen as a team that is close to a Super Bowl every year. But now I think they're feeling that the coaching is what's holding them back from that Super Bowl win rather than pushing them forward. So my question is if it keeps going the way it is, do you think there's going to be pressure on that Sirianni could be out this season at some point?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that is obviously the injuries haven't helped the Eagles. Without AJ Brown, Lane Johnson, they haven't had a full team together. I don't think, or the fully fit strength team together so far this season. But we hammer down this is a team that is has so much talent and so many players, particularly in those trench positions that can seemingly slot in. There should be no reason why the Eagles are looking so bad. The way they are, and unfortunately, I think the Eagles fan base, certainly from talking to people and looking on social media, obviously that can be a tough place to start, but it really feels that the fan base is has turned on Sirianni. Some of the things I think he was talking about. He wasn't able to explain the identity of his team in a press conference over the weekend, and yeah, I think the Eagles aren't going to be, they aren't going to be, they're not going to get back to where they were at the start of last year. Obviously they got to the Super Bowl the way we were before without addressing these these poor relationships, this poor atmosphere that's within the roster, and unfortunately, the main person responsible for that atmosphere and for this team going into games is the head coach. They've obviously tried with the different play calls on both sides of the field, but if they're not able, two great minds in Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, if they're not able to make drastic changes to the team on both sides of the ball, I think it comes back to Sirianni, unfortunately. There are plenty of names out there on the head coaching free agency, to be able to perhaps turn things around even this season.
A certain ex-Patriots head coach might be out there. But,
can you imagine?
I
mean, if I was an Eagles fan, I'd be absolutely all over that. I think it feels like it's you're not going to find out if you do it in that sort of thing. I'm sure Bill Belichick would again be all over coming straight back into coaching and taking on a team that has genuine Super Bowl aspirations. I obviously don't want to speak ill of a head coach, but unfortunately, I think Sirianni is on his last legs in Philadelphia, and I'm expecting a change. It just depends when that is. Can they save the season? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think change is looking pretty imminent. I mean, it'd be interesting to see, what other people think, what you think. But that's how I see it.
I think this fan base is unforgiving. They got rid of Doug Peterson, rightly or wrongly, after winning a Super Bowl with them. Okay, how he's doing in Jacksonville, maybe that was the right decision in the end, and also how he did in Carolina. But I don't know. It's a hard one. I mean, I'm just texting Gareth now. I just said about Bill Belichick for Eagles, and he's just gone, now I prefer Mike Vrabel, which I think that works. That works fantastic.
That'd be great. I think either of those guys, I think Vrabel particularly, we know how he's obviously a young guy who's got great experience in the NFL. He was able to build a Titans team who obviously didn't have the same, had good players, but didn't have the quality, I suppose, across the board that the Eagles had, and was able to take them to great depths over his, over the years. So I think Vrabel just fits the mentality. I think that's the main thing for the Eagles, because I think the change in mentality, if you can have someone like a leader like Mike Vrabel, we've seen what Dan Campbell can do for the Detroit Lions without necessarily being, a studied coach in terms of, the qualifications, the badges, the experience. You can have someone that can just instill a good atmosphere and a good team ethos, and let the coaches get on with doing their job. I think that makes for at worst a decent football team, and that feels like the Eagles they could still end up having a great season, as we've said, with the record, but they don't feel like a decent football team at the moment, and have scraped to the record.
We'll have to keep an eye on what they go over. But Mike Vrabel, I never even thought about Mike Vrabel, but I do really like that. I really love the idea of that. Let's talk about the other team in the NFC East. As on the tagline says Jayden take over, and that's with Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, because how incredible have they looked so far, Johnny? I mean, they're the best team in the NFC East at the minute. They've got to be. They are. I'm going to throw some stuff out that 82.1% completion percentage for Jayden Daniels after the first four games is the highest completion percentage by any player during a 4-game stretch with a minimum 100 passing attempts. I've got a few more stats in, but I'm going to fire them thick and fast at you, because this team is just a joy to watch. I mean, how many years the Commanders felt just in damsel and in distress and just been really, really poor. And they've drafted Jayden Daniels at the number 2 spot this year, coming out of LSU, and a lot of people said how good he could be in this NFL. I think there was that worry, because he is a run first style quarterback in the sense, but at the same time he has got that arm and he's proving that. And how are you feeling about the Commanders at the minute?
Absolutely all in now, I think, on the Commanders. I think, like a lot of people, we had not just about Jayden Daniels, but I think about this team. They have been, I suppose, a laughingstock of a franchise over recent years, particularly with their ownership, their stadium, some of their quarterback disasters, I suppose, in recent years, whether that is their fault or not. It was a real comical show in Washington, and they look so much unlike. They look like the Detroit Lions, when they first came on the scene in terms of wow, this is a new team that is going to win a lot of football matches and could go really far in this league. And Jayden Daniels, another stat. What was it? He's got more. He's led more passing drives this year than he has in completions. I think he only has 19 completions and is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL at the moment. I think this weekend we saw, a bit of a different play, and we're starting to see the whole package. I think with Daniels, who's throwing, a lot more, into the middle of the field. I think that's, obviously we know how good he is with his feet. I'm looking forward to seeing, the deep ball with Terry. He's obviously got a good connection already with Terry McLaurin. I think that's something we could see in the next few weeks. But I think he looks very mature, and he's processing his mistakes when he makes them. And it just looks very mature for a rookie quarterback, and that's obviously something that the Commanders will absolutely love. I've got to say, not just about Daniels. We can talk him as much as we want, but Cliff Kingsbury has obviously had made a huge impact on the way the Commanders are playing. I think I mentioned similarities with the Lions, but the Commanders' run game has completely evolved. Brian Robinson alongside Jayden Daniels, and the variety of players who are getting involved in this offense. I saw something, I can't remember the number, but the amount of players that Daniels is getting involved is really impressive. So early on into his career. Where can this go? If you look at the teams that they've played, they probably haven't come up against, on paper, a good defense. And they're coming up against the Browns and the Ravens. I think that's going to be, the next 2 weeks is going to be their test. But with their divisional rivals, the Cowboys, Eagles, and the Giants, two defenses who have been really poor to start the season, there's no reason why this Commanders team can't be the Texans of last year and storm to the division and perhaps get a playoff win. I think this is the start of something very, very exciting for the Commanders, and very excited for Commanders fans because they've obviously gone through a lot, as the other teams that I've just mentioned, and they deserve their bit of attention because they've got a real superstar in Jayden Daniels, who's going to be there and entertaining them for so many years to come.
I am going to have to put the brakes on a little bit with Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, though. But I will so I'll give you some cool stuff first about him, and then I'm going to say the sort of the negatives, because I think you've been quite harsh on some of the defenses on this NFC East, and maybe I haven't looked at this Commanders defense, because that's what's also pretty impressive with Jayden Daniels. But he has passes under 15 air yards. He has 35 successful completions in a row, and Next Gen Stats said that there was a 0.02% chance of that happening with him, and he smashed that. It is also the second most efficient offense since 2000, only behind that New England Patriots offense of 2007. He's had 23 scoring drives to 4 points, and you're right about 19 incompletions as well. He's running away with rookie year, but the problem, but also what's good is, in spite of is statistically a terrible defense, he's doing all of this as well, because his defense has not done him any favors. They're currently 25th in the whole of NFL. They've allowed the most passing touchdowns in the NFL, 10. They've not had an interception yet. They're 23rd in rushing yards. They have only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns, but they've allowed for 882 passing yards over there, which is 22nd. So it's not like he's had help from his defense to get them into a winning position. He has had to play a bit of hero ball, but he's done that very well. And Dan Quinn, who came in as the head coach this year, a very, very good defensive coach, and showed that in Dallas. And it's so strange that, the Commanders sort of flipped from this offense that couldn't do anything but a really stout defense that kept them in games. They traded all them pieces away and people like Montez Sweat and Chase Young. And now it's flipped the script, and their offense seems to be incredibly efficient. And they're doing that in spite of the defense, but it's doing really poor. But it's really what is interesting is what you said, Johnny, earlier. Is they feel very Detroit Lions of 3 years ago. A really high-powered offense, but their defense needed a lot of work. They've got some stars on there, but they still need a lot of work. So is it sort of they're still going to have to go back to the drawing board with their defense, aren't they? But does this also make how impressive Jayden Daniels has been even better?
I actually think, I think the bar was so low for the Commanders' defense last year. I mean, if you remember, Sam Howell was able to, obviously, he's not in the same conversation, but was able to put up, decentish numbers in terms of scoring, and the defense wasn't able to help them out at all. I think they had the worst point differential in the league last year, and allowed the most points. So, even small margins after 4 games, I think, we know how good Dan Quinn is at guiding a defense. Obviously, he was able to transform the Cowboys' defense over the last 3 years or so. They are already looking a little bit weaker. There's obviously a bit of a common denominator. So I think we're so early on, and I think that in this Commanders rebuild, this is obviously the first, I would say, season of that rebuild. I don't think you can count last year with obviously the coaching staff and the quarterback who was in place. They made so many changes. I really like some of the defensive players. I mean, Frankie Louvu, I think, is a really good player, and he made a couple of plays in this game against the Cardinals. And yeah, I think there's the bar, unfortunately, was so low for the Commanders defensively. I mean, I've not got any stats, but obviously, we've talked about some of the teams that they played aren't perhaps the best teams in the world, and I think they were probably going to be much bigger tests, particularly like the Ravens in 2 weeks. That will obviously be a huge test for the defense. But I think it is very early days, and I don't want to get carried away even with Jayden Daniels. But yeah, I think there are signs there that the Commanders could be really special, and I think you just need to get this defense figured out, and if it can perform with consistency, I think that's a key thing, because like you say, they had a lot of good players that they just weren't working as a unit over the last couple of years. If they can perform with consistency, then I think they'll be a real threat to this division, and potentially even in the playoffs. But I mean, I think even this weekend, I think they what was it? There was the final score. They only conceded 14 points against a Cardinals team that had put up numbers to start the year. So I think there are. I'm acting really defensive for the Commanders here, but yeah, I think there are perhaps signs that they could be good. They just need to be given time, and I think a lot more coaching until that happens.
My worry really is that this is clearly going to be a project, and that Dan Quinn may be all in, but is Cliff Kingsbury going to be all in? Because Cliff Kingsbury is a very talented offensive coordinator. It didn't really work out with him in Arizona, but if this trajectory continues for the rest of the season, teams are now going to be sniffing around Cliff Kingsbury, and it may be, that may be a bigger element of why Jayden Daniels is doing well under Kingsbury. And it was sort of infamous in Arizona that he plays quite loose, not incredibly stern, and I don't know if that completely works as a head coach, but it seems to be working as offensive coordinator. And when that coaching carousel comes back around in February, March time, there may be people sniffing around him, and maybe the history of the Arizona Cardinals means that he wouldn't go, but the Commanders surely are hoping that he would stick around as well for this defense to then improve, and then have a really complementary two-side of the ball. But I mean, Jayden Daniels at the minute, the trajectory he's going, he's going to be rookie of the year, offensively wise. Anyway, he's going to smash that, and he seems to be. He might be smashing a few records as well because he seems to be the real deal. And I mean, the Bears may be feeling a little bit put out at the minute, but you never know. I mean, there's plenty of time for both of these quarterbacks, but he seems to be playing with the difference between Caleb and him is the expectation. I think, Caleb had huge expectation going to Chicago, and Chicago had huge expectations of him. I feel like the Commanders haven't exactly put the world on Daniel's shoulders, and that seems to have worked. And funny enough, hopefully other teams may do that a little bit more as well. Let's move on to our final subject of the evening, and that is talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, who again have had another player injured in their wide receiver, Rashee Rice, in their win against the Chargers, which was 17-10. He's been carted off. Reported torn ACL, potentially season ending. Hasn't fully been accounted for yet how long he may be out. Coach Andy Reid, has said it is not looking good. So far this year, they've beat the Ravens 27-20. They then beat the Bengals 26-25, 22-17 against the Falcons, and 17-10 against the Chargers. Not exactly looked like the convincing Kansas City Chiefs team that we are used to, Johnny. And now without Rashee Rice moving forward for we don't know how long yet, but suspicious. It's suspected to be a long time. I mean, the Chiefs going to overcome that? They've not looked great so far.
Yeah, I mean, you can never write off the Chiefs. So our thoughts with Rashee Rice, but yeah, it's looking really difficult, isn't it? Because Rice has been the engine, I suppose, to the Chiefs' passing offense. So early in this season, he's been the one with the most yards, most targets. Has done the most things, I think, for the Chiefs in terms of they've had a fairly quiet for their standard start to the year, but Rice has looked elevated, I suppose, on his work in his rookie year. His ability to win off the line and his production after the catch, I think, has been a huge part of why the Chiefs have been so successful, because I think in this game we saw mistakes from Mahomes, some of the other receivers. And if you look around the field, Travis Kelce's obviously not having a great start to the year. He looks like he could potentially be winding down. We don't want to say anything, but he could be winding down.
He had a pretty good game in this game, though, didn't he?
Yes, he did. No, he did. That is true. But he's not been. If Rice stayed in this game, I would have expected Rice to have been, taking plays off Kelsey. If you look around the roster, they're obviously, David Worthy had a good game, and we hope he can develop, in Rice's absence. But other than that, Marquise Brown, who is, I think, a decent receiver, particularly, and could be a really good weapon for the Chiefs. He's obviously out until I think he might be out for the rest of this season as well. Isaiah Pacheco is another big name who is out. I'm not sure how long.
Their offense at the minute leaves them with Xavier Worthy, Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, McCole Harmon, with a running back room, Samaje Perine. They've brought in Kareem Hunt and the rookie Carson Steele. I mean, and obviously they've got Noah Gray, Travis Kelce, and they've got that other tight end as well, whose name's escaping me. I know looks like it doesn't look like much, but hasn't Pat Mahomes done more with less?
He has, and that's the only thing that you can obviously never write off the Chiefs. Mahomes is able to do it with I think it was just Valdez-Scantling and Smith-Schuster is his primary targets. But I think this. I mean, the Chiefs are undefeated. They have got their. I had the Chargers down for this game. I didn't actually realise Joe Alt was a late pullout for the game for the Chargers, and you could see how dominant the defense looked. And I think they are going to grow as the season goes on. I think Chris Jones is looking his usual best. George Karlaftis as well is looking like a really good edge rusher. I think this is his third season. Can he turn into one of the premier edge rushers in the league? I think they're going to be relying on the defense a lot this year. So I think,
but the defense has proved that though. The defense has proved that in previous seasons.
Exactly,
They can be relied upon. They're so good.
Exactly, and I think it's going to be the same again this year. Patrick Mahomes is obviously the best player, in the league, if not, certainly in the last, perhaps of all time. They, can obviously do so much with whatever's around him. He, can produce magic, but it will be, I think, the defense that can really, save them in those situations. Yeah, it's obviously a huge loss, but because it's the Kansas City Chiefs, it's probably not reason to be overly panic stations. I think at this stage is what I'm trying to say.
My big thing with the Kansas City Chiefs, and we've said it on previous pods, and I'm going to carry on reiterating it, they do not care about this time of the season. They don't care. All the Chiefs are focused on is getting a playoff spot. They don't need to win the division. They're not bothered about winning the division, I don't even think. I don't even think they're bothered about playing silky great football anymore. I think all they care about is getting to the playoffs and going, then we'll just turn it on and do what we do best. And, the Bengals have had them close. Several teams have had them close now. But they find a way. They always find a way. And let's say Rice is out for the rest of the season. In Mahomes' mind, I think he just sees it as, well, now I've got 13 more weeks to just build my relationship with Xavier Worthy, with the rest of the guys. He knows Juju, he knows McCall Hardman, he knows Sky Moore for that fact, and Kelsey. Kelsey is also one of them players who doesn't care about now. They care about week 16, 17, when they're in getting towards the playoffs, and then switching it on going into the playoffs. So I do think this is going to be lost. I mean, Rashee Rice was even after going down this game, he's still 10th in receptions, 12th in yards, and it was showing an incredible season. Obviously there was issues in the offseason where he may not play at all, and for some people's minds, he shouldn't have been playing at all this season. But that is the NFL, unfortunately. So it did look on course that he was going to have probably the best season of his career so far anyway, and maybe even been a top 5 receiver at some point in some arguments, maybe on the stat sheet wise anyway. I think still people have the eye test with these players anyway. But I mean, is it foolish that teams and fans maybe look around at this and think that KC are now incredibly beatable because their offense is so patchwork? Or do you think everyone's quite astute to the fact that this is still the Kansas City Chiefs? But also, does it give hope to some of these teams? Some of these teams may roll into the Kansas now, or Kansas comes to them and go, well, we can outplay this offense. Our defense is really good, and it may. Do you think it encourages teams?
The Kansas City Chiefs are, the team to beat. So, I don't think one player makes them. I mean, obviously, it certainly makes them weaker in terms of the weapons and the players that they have. But in terms of I think what's different this year, I think the sort of changing of the guard. Obviously, Rashee Rice has been, he's now looking as in the number one guy in terms of the target on this offense. And the Chiefs have scraped through, these opening games, which we've not seen a dominant performance from this team. I think every single game they could have technically lost if a possession went the other way. So I do think they're beatable, but I think you make a really good point in terms of they don't need to win this division. I think they can win this division even still with their eyes closed. The Broncos, okay, they have possibly one of the best defenses in the league at the moment, but we saw against the Jets that they can't get anything going offensively at the moment. The Raiders are still a long way off. and obviously the Chargers who they beat. If they can, just get to the postseason, I think
the problem with the Chargers is his fitness, isn't it? At the minute,
Exactly.
Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Rashawn Slater, Joe, they're key players. Can't stay
absolutely. Fit. We saw the Chargers. Their offensive line has now become their massive, huge weapon. We see how it's revolutionized their run game, and how much Herbert got beaten up against the Chiefs at the weekend. Yeah, they obviously need that unit to stay fit, which is unlikely if you go off historic of the last few seasons. I think the Chiefs are beatable, but it doesn't really matter at this stage of the season. Like you say, will the Chiefs go out and try and trade for a big name wideout? Amari Cooper's someone who's been, I think
Devontae Adams is also
Devontae
a name out
Adams,
there.
John Hopkins.
I just can't see that. I just don't think that's how they play.
Exactly. It's not their style. It's not how the team is built. I mean, it would be great, I think, for the neutral to see, Mahomes playing with. I think Rashee Rice was, obviously becoming that the new Tyreek. Imagine him coming back. I mean, obviously he's obviously not very happy at the moment in Miami. But it's not essential. People were saying that the Chiefs were better, without Tyreek Hill, and they could find something in Rashee Rice going down. I think Andy Reid said today that they're going to be looking to spread the ball across the targets. Can they try and unlock the potential of players like Sky Moore? Obviously, Noah Gray mentioned the tight end. He had some good plays, I think, at the weekend. They've got receivers who have played a bit part role, I think, over the last couple of years. Who they've probably, Sky Moore, I remember, was a high second round pick, and he's done next to nothing really in his NFL career so far.
He'll catch a touchdown in the Super Bowl now.
Yeah, exactly. Not quite nothing, but the Chiefs are still the team that everyone's chasing. They're 4-0, obviously, for a reason. It's incredibly hard to win games in this division, so they're obviously doing something right. But yeah, it is a huge loss. But I think it would be a huge loss, or a bigger loss, sorry, for other teams in the league if it wasn't Kansas City Chiefs.
The problem is, we keep saying it is the Kansas City Chiefs, isn't it? Like that is the problem, is that they've been in this position before, they've been with their backs up against the wall, and they always come out fighting and always come out winning Super Bowls, which is obviously incredibly irritating for the rest of the NFL. So we'll see how they go moving forward. Thank you, Johnny, for joining me tonight. And there's only two of us tonight. James will be back next week with us. We've got more shows coming for you this week, including our college show with Andrew and Alex, as well as betting show over the weekend with Andrew and Adam. So a lot of fun. Obviously, the London Games is this weekend. We are incredibly excited. We are going to the media days on Friday. Myself with my partner going to the Vikings one. Johnny and Sky are off to the New York Jets one. We will all be at the game as well. So if you see us knocking around, please come and say hello. We love chatting to all NFL fans. And just hit us up in DMs if you want to come say hello, or we'll come to you. No problem at all. There'll be loads of exciting content over the weekend. So make sure you keep an eye on that. We've also got a few fan events as well. And make sure you check out our shows and follow us on YouTube and on social media as well. Until then, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your week.